This is skill 16. It's graphing quadratic functions using intercepts and point plotting. You're asked to graph the quadratic equation by completing an XY table, which means picking points and indicating the X and Y intercepts. So I have a few options for this. You want to fill in this table just so you have a decent picture of this graph. The graph's going to look like a curve called a parabola. That's how quadratic equations appear when you graph them. So you want to find X and Y intercepts, and you also want to pick a few more key points so you have a decent looking graph. One thing I would do is to find the x-intercept. That's when y equals 0, so that's a good point we'll figure out. To find the y-intercept, that's when x equals 0. So you can put those two zeros in there and fill out the table. If you put in y equals 0, this problem becomes 0 equals x squared minus 2x minus 3. Which means if it equals x squared, or x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0, there's going to be, this can be factored, and you'll have two solutions. This ends up factored into x minus 3 and x plus 1. And if you solve that for x, because these are multiplying equal to 0, that means either x minus 3 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. So if you solve this equation for x, if you add 3 to both sides, you get x equals 3. So there's one of your values that makes y equals 0. If you solve this equation for x, you subtract 1 to both sides, you get x equals negative 1. So you also get 2 points kind of for 1 right there. When y is 0, x could be a 3, but also when y is 0, x could be a negative 1. So those are 2 points right there that'll be on our graph. So that's 3 comma 0, that's right here. And here's negative 1 comma 0. If you put in x equals 0 into this equation, that's going to put a 0 here and a 0 here. That's going to give you 0. All that's left is the negative 3. So y is going to be a negative 3. So that's right there. So notice your x-intercepts, where it crosses the x-axis, are at 3 comma 0 and negative 1 comma 0. Be sure to indicate that. And your y-intercept is 0, negative 3. And now you want to go through and find some more points. Remember that these graphs are symmetric, which means that between these two x-intercepts, the graph is going to have either a low point, a minimum vertex, or a maximum vertex. If you go in the middle of these, this is 1, 2, 3, a gap of 4. So if you go halfway, when x equals 1, your vertex is going to be, when x equals 1, it's going to be someplace along here, probably down here because this point is down here. So if I put in 1 for x into this rule, 1 squared is 1, minus 2 times 1, which is 2. 1 minus 2 is negative 1, minus 3 is negative 4. There's that point. So that's going to be my vertex. If I want a few more points, remember that the graph is also symmetric. So you have this axis of symmetry that goes through the vertex, and the graphs kind of have this mirror image. So there's a point right here, there's going to be a point right here. So that's going to be at 2, negative 2, or 2, negative 3. So my graph looks something like this. That probably is enough points for this graph. So it's going to go down, it's going to have a minimum point as a vertex right here, it's going to curve back up, and that's the graph of that quadratic equation. So here's one for you to practice. Take some time, fill out the XY table, find the X and Y intercepts, and a few more points, and make sure you have a decent looking graph. And pause the video while you work on it, and then play the rest of the video and see how you did. Alright, I'm assuming you finished this problem. So let's go through and find X and Y intercepts. When x equals 0, we'll find y. When y equals 0, we'll find x. If you put in x equals 0 into this rule, that gives you 0 here, 0 here. All you have is plus 5, so there's 1 point. So that's your y-intercept. When x equals 0, y equals 5. If you put in y equals 0, you get this equation, and you have to solve this for x. Because it's quadratic, it works out well if you factor it, and you're multiplying those two factors equal to 0. This problem factors into x plus 1 times x plus 5. So when do those two factors themselves equal 0? Well, x plus 1 can equal 0, x plus 5 can equal 0. I go through and solve those for x. If I do minus 1 to both sides here, I get x equals negative 1. If I do minus 5 to both sides here, I get x equals negative 5. So I have two places where this graph, which is called a parabola, will cross the x-axis. when y is 0, x is -1, or when y is 0, x is -5. So let's graph those points. Those are my x-intercepts, -1, 0, and -5, 0. And see what we look like. So here's -1, 0, here's -5, 0, and here's 0, 5 up here. So it seems like my graph's probably going to come down and go back up. So there's probably a vertex point in the middle of these two. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. If I go halfway, I'm at -3. So if I put in -3 for x and square that, I get 9. That's going to give me -18. 9 -18 is -9 plus 5 is a -4. So that point is at -3, -4 right there. Remember, these graphs are symmetric with that vertical line that goes through that vertex. So I have a point here, 2 there. If this one is 3 to the right, there'll be a point 1, 2, 3 to the left. And that's a pretty good picture of this parabola. Kind of a long, the tall, narrow looking parabola. So that's the graph. And that's the end of skill number 16.